What's up, geeks? Welcome back for another episode of Best Geek Vlog Ever, the weekly web show that proves it's okay to be a geek. We're your hosts, Brenden Toda and
Ezequiel Gutierrez.
On this week's episode of Best Geek Vlog Ever, we're introducing a new segment we call Staff Picks, where Easy and I provide a new suggestion for all you geeks to enjoy something you may have not tried before. In celebration of the release of Man of Steel, this week's theme is going to be DC Comics, and specifically we're going to be talking about the DC animated original movies.
My pick is actually sort of surprising even to me to this day. I came to the DC animated films a little bit late in the game. The first one was released in 2007. The first one I ever saw was in 2011, which was Green Lantern Emerald Knights. These are animated films geared towards adults. I'd always wondered why a lot of the big animated studios were making pretty strictly kids movies, and I had been wondering for a long time, how come an animated studio isn't making animated films geared towards adults? And that's when I discovered the DC animated films. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a huge Batman fan. My favorites throughout the series are usually Batman ones, specifically Year One, and of course, the Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2 that just came out last year.
Which, if you want to see our coverage on The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, click this annotation right here. We have exclusive interviews with stars Peter Weller, executive producer Bruce Timm, director Jay Oliva, screenwriter Bob Goodman. Click to see all those exclusive interviews for Best Geek Blog Ever.
They're really good, actually. Those movies, I sort of knew what to expect going into them. They're based on classic Frank Miller stories that I own, that I read on a regular basis, so I sort of knew what was going on. Now, granted, when you get to see it transform that way into film, it's a very different experience. It's a lot of fun to experience it that way. But the one for me that really surprised me was Superman versus the Elite. Now, I'm not a huge Superman fan. I've never really connected with that character. I've tried to read it several times, but never could get into it. Superman versus the Elite is one of the better films I've seen as a whole, probably in the last 10 years. It is adapted from the single issue of Action Comics 775 titled What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way, written by Joe Kelly, who also serves as writer for the project. That fascinates me in itself because a lot of these other books are adapted from big chunks of source material, whereas this one was one comic book. The film brings up the question is, do we need Superman in a world where the justice system seems to fail? People are getting killed and doing these horrible, horrible things. Is having rules to sort of bring justice on them what we want to see? They're the antithesis of Superman.
Yeah, where he has morals and a code and everything that he stands for. They don't, and they just kind of employ justice the way they see fit. And for a time, in the film, it seems to work better than what Superman's ways are.
For a while there, you're almost kind of rooting for the Elite because they're taking care of business, and that's what you want to see. Superman the Elite is absolutely my favorite, and would be my recommendation for anyone, Superman fan or not, to watch that one sort of as a jumping off point for the rest of the DC Universe films.
Also, if you want to check it out, it is available on Netflix Instant Streaming. If you have a Netflix membership, check it out. My staff pick for this week is Batman Superman Public Enemies, the 2009 adaptation of a storyline from the comics of the same name. It features Batman and Superman teaming up, obviously, to face off against President Lex Luthor. In the comics at the time, Lex had positioned himself to be the president of the United States with his power and his influence, and makes Superman public enemy number one, putting out a bounty for his head and Batman to go along with him. The original story was written by Jeff Loeb with pencils by Ed McGuinness, who has a very animated kind of feel to it. And in all of these adaptations in the original animated movies, they really try to stay true to that aesthetic as they move from project to project. Reading the comic books first, I knew right away this would make a great adaptation someday. What is really interesting about this particular release is that it reunites Kevin Conroy and Tim Daly from the animated series that originally aired in the 90s. Also, Clancy Brown, who played Lex Luthor in the Superman animated series as well. It's executive produced by Bruce Timm, who is really the godfather of all of these projects and carries through his same type of ideals from Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Justice League, all the way through to these original animated movies. I would say they're the spiritual successors of those projects, but they're able to directly adapt stories from the comics without having to go through everything. I think with something as great as Justice League or Justice League Unlimited, they had to stay in their own kind of universe and couldn't adapt everything because it didn't make sense in the ongoing continuity. It's super exciting, super fun, lots of action. Batman and Superman face just about every villain in the DC Comics villain pantheon. Well worth your time. Again, Kevin Conroy and Tim Daly alone are worth the price of admission, but add on Clancy Brown and Bruce Timm and think you have a winning combination right there.
Classy. With comic book movies being so popular right now, there's a lot of, at least from what I've heard, there's a lot of people who want to see some of the classic stories being told. The comic book fans really like to see those story elements from the comics up on screen. The DC Universe films really adapt them almost page for page. Like, there's a really great symbiotic relationship between the comics and what you see on screen. It's not exactly panel for panel, and obviously the filmmakers are trying to add their own voice to these films. But if you're a comic book fan who wants to see the classics, the quintessential stories being told up on screen, this is a really great way to see those.
And I think the audiences for comic book fare in general are becoming more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And so the stories do not have to necessarily pander to the general masses. And after all these comic book fans are just fans of media in general.
Yeah.
And I don't think you necessarily need to qualify yourself as, I just like comic books or I just like movies. We're all people and we all can enjoy. Yeah, we're all people. We are the world. We are comic book fans.
Those are just 2 of our picks. There are 17 of the DC Universe films,
with more coming this summer.
Yeah, and they're all, ranging the gamut from Wonder Woman to the Justice League,
Green Lantern.
Next
one's about Flash, actually.
The Flashpoint Paradox. Yeah, there are a lot of characters that they're focusing on that really can appeal to a wide variety of people as well. It's not just Superman and Batman all the time.
So those are our staff picks for the DC Animated Universe original movies. Let us know what your favorites are in the comments section down below. To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, hit the subscribe button right here. New episodes are uploaded every Monday. If you have a suggestion for next week's episode, leave it in the comments section down below, or hit us up at our Twitter at EpicHappensHere. For Best Geek Vlog Ever, we're your hosts, Brenden Toda and
Ezequiel Gutierrez. And remember, every weekday is a geek day.